In today's Rank 'em All video, we're going to take on Ronnie James Dio's solo band Dio and their full discography. So there won't be any Black Sabbath, Rainbow, Heaven and Hell or Alpha albums in this ranking. And after leaving his first tenure with Black Sabbath, Ronnie James Dio took drummer Vinny Appice with him, and they recruited Jimmy Bain, who Dio played with in Rainbow, and a young promising guitarist in Vivian Campbell from the new wave of British heavy metal band Sweet Savage. And it was this lineup that then recorded the band's first studio album Holy Diver back in 1983. But before we talk more about all the Dio albums, make sure that you guys smash that like button for the algorithm gods and subscribe with the bell notifications turned on if you're new to the channel. And now it's time to rank all full-length studio albums from Dio. So let's do this. The worst Dio album is in my opinion Angry Machines, because it came out in 1996 when Dio's popularity was at a record low, I would say. Mostly due to it being 1996 and the bands that were big in the 80s were back to playing smaller venues again. The album Angry Machines was also a bit different in its topics. It was a more pessimistic album about the times that we lived in back then. Less fantasy-inspired lyrics and more dystopian, I would say. It also has this 90s weirdness to it. The riffs were groovier this time, and maybe the band's dissatisfaction with the whole scene, and seeing everything that they built up for decades going away with the shifting of trends. Maybe a bit of that bitterness seeped into the music here. Even if Dio himself was against the trends of the 90s, you can still hear very clearly what decade this album came out in. And is Angry Machines a bad album since I ranked it at the bottom? Well, in comparison to what some of the other bands were doing at the time, I think it's alright. But for me, it's Dio's weakest moment, so next. In ninth place was Strange Highways from 1993. And after a short stint with Black Sabbath to record Dehumanizer, Dio put out a new record with an almost completely new lineup. Vinny Appice was back behind the drum set again, and we also had a new bassist in Jeff Pilson, known for his time in Darken, and a new guitarist in Tracy G. It was also 1993 here, and you all know what happened in the 90s with the modern production values. And even a metal icon like Dio was affected by this. And you can hear that the production here is slightly more modern this time. Their previous record, Lock Up the Wolves, was a step towards a older hard rock sound. But this record was almost a U-turn for the band. But it's not like they went all in on that stuff either. Dio is still Dio, and Strange Highways is an alright album, especially for being released back in 1993. But on the other hand, it's not my first pick when I'm in the mood for some Dio. So, next. In 8th place was Master of the Moon from 2004, and this album turned out to be the last Dio album. Dio himself did of course one more record with Heaven and Hell, but that's another band. And on Master of the Moon, Craig Goldie, Jeff Pilson and Scott Warren returned to the band for one last album, which they of course didn't know at the time, but it ended up that way, I guess. Master of the Moon is a solid heavy metal record in my opinion, even if it might not reach the same heights as Dio in his glory days. I still think he sounds amazing here. Master of the Moon, End of the World and Living the Lie are real good songs from this record that are worth checking out. And I think that Dio surely delivered all the way up to his very last album, so next. In 7th place was Magica from the year 2000, and this was something of a comeback album for Dio, since the former Dio members Craig Goldie, Jimmy Bain and Simon Wright all returned to the lineup for this album. And Magica was a return to a more fantastical lyrical themes. And it was also Dio's first concept album, even if it was released towards the end of his career. And the underlying story here is a pretty standard fantasy fare, about a planet besieged by the forces of darkness, and the hero Ariel and his son Chalice are the ones to save the planet. And this album was a good release and a step in the right direction after 1996 Angry Machines. So, next. In 6th place we have Killing the Dragon from 2002, and it came out 2 years after Magica, and it's the only Dio album to feature guitarist Doug Aldrich, who played with Lion back in the 80s and in Whitesnake since around the release of this album. Killing the Dragon is a traditional sounding heavy metal album, even more metal than some of his more recent albums. Overall, Killing the Dragon is a good album. Sure, there are some fillers here too, but Dio always delivered good material, even if his popularity was at an all-time low during this time. They recorded a music video for the song Push with Tenacious D, and they also did some collaborations with them later on. And this brought some focus back on Dio again, which is kinda sad to say. It should definitely been the other way around, but we live in strange times when mediocrity is often praised. Just like on Angry Machines, Dio stated that the dragon in the title refers to technology, because he expressed some concerns with it threatening societies in the future. And I personally think that this is the best Dio album since 1990's Lock Up the Wolves. So, next. In 5th place we have Lock Up the Wolves, and this was a fresh new start for the band since every member of the band except Dio had been replaced for this album. 18-year-old guitarist Rowan Robertson was chosen to be the band's new guitarist, and Simon Wright, who had played with AC/DC for a couple of years during the 80s, joined Dio for this one. And new was also bassist Teddy Cook and keyboardist Jens Johansson, who had played with Yngwie Malmsteen. This album differs a bit from the previous 4 records. It's slower, and it's also more of a bluesy hard rock album, because those new wave of British heavy metal sounding riffs that Vivian Campbell and later Craig Goldie brought to the band were more or less gone here. I wouldn't say that there was a big shift in the direction for the band here, but I think it was enough for it to be noticeable. And even if Rowan Robertson was just 18 years old here, he's a very competent guitarist, and he's actually one of my favorite things about this record. And the album Lock Up the Wolves didn't have the big hits like their previous records, and at times the album is a bit too soft for me personally, but I think it will grow on you if you give it a chance. And my favorite tracks are probably the title track Lock Up the Wolves and Born on the Sun. So, next. In 4th place we have Sacred Heart from 1985, and this was the last album to feature guitarist Vivian Campbell, who left for Whitesnake but would later end up in Def Leppard. Sacred Heart kicks off with the title track King of Rock and Roll, which sounds like a live recording, but the crowd noises was just dubbed in, so it's fake, and I would have preferred the track without the crowds, to be honest. And the album also features the 3 big hit singles Sacred Heart, Rock and Roll Children and Hungry for Heaven. Sacred Heart was criticized for being too soft at the time, with more frequent use of keyboards, and the songs were more radio friendly than ever before. The standout tracks weren't as strong as on the first 2 albums, and the deep cuts on this album feels more like fillers in comparison to their previous work. They could have left out a song like Shoot Shoot, it would have made more sense as a B-side or something like that. But in retrospect, I'm not going to write off this album completely, because it might have been a slight disappointment in comparison to the first 2 albums, The Last in Line and Holy Diver, but you just can't expect a band to deliver masterpieces every time they release an album. And even if Sacred Heart is a bit commercial and on the softer side of things, the songwriting is still solid, and I hold Sacred Heart as one of the better Dio albums. So, next. In 3rd place we have Dream Evil from 1987, and this was the first album without original guitarist Vivian Campbell. And to replace him, Dio recruited Craig Goldie, known from Rough Cut, the same band as their keyboardist Claude Schnell came from. And he did, by the way, become an official member of the band on this record. And it wouldn't be completely wrong to say that this was the last album of the classic era of Dio, because bassist Jimmy Bain and drummer Vinny Appice both left the band after this record. I mean, both would later return to the band, but there were some lineup changes on the following couple of records. If Sacred Heart was flirting more with the mainstream audiences, Dream Evil was a step away from that, because it's a darker album, but it still has a few softer keyboard-driven tracks, like All the Fools Sailed Away or I Could Have Been a Dreamer, and those were also the singles from this record. But they didn't manage to drive the same record sales, so the band shipped like 1/10 of the albums that Sacred Heart sold, which is kinda strange since this album is great and I think it's generally overlooked by the fans. The first 3 tracks on the album are my favorites: Night People, Dream Evil, and of course Sunset Superman, that has this cool riff in it. It's one of the best Dio tracks, but the strange song title might have confused some of the fans. Dream Evil is a great album overall. It's an essential Dio release in my book. So, next. In second place, we have their 1983 debut album Holy Diver. And hat off to Dio, because he had done it again. He sung on Rainbow's Rising, on Black Sabbath's Heaven and Hell, and now Dio did the impossible again, by creating another album that would go down in history. I mean, there is no one like Ronnie out there, and there will never be another singer like him ever again. Someone that could come in and bring his own ideas, lyrics and nuances to a band, and always be successful at it, not only in terms of record sales, but an album like Holy Diver will outlast all of us. I mean, 3 of the biggest hard rock or heavy metal songs of all time is on this album: Holy Diver, Rainbow in the Dark, and Don't Talk to Strangers. Those 3 songs alone have over 250 million plays on Spotify, so there is no denying the impact that this album still has till this day. But what separates it from most other Dio albums is that there are no fillers on this record, like Stand Up and Shout with its new wave of British heavy metal sounding riffs from Vivian Campbell, or the Black Sabbath vibe of Shame on the Night. Holy Diver is a classic album, and an album that all fans of hard music should own. But the greatest Dio record is, in my opinion, 1984's The Last in Line. It kicks off with this up-tempo track, We Rock, that leads into the softer but also classic intro to The Last in Line. It's the band's new keyboardist Claude Schnell, formerly of Rough Cut, that delivers those memorable keyboard melodies to the title track. Adding keyboards is always something to look out for, but this album ain't drenched in it, which is good. Dio is also a very good lyricist, and I think he proves it on this record, even if he at times throw in some weird rhymes, like in the track One Night in the City, One Night Looking Pretty. Even if the rhymes are forced sometimes, I think it works when Dio sings them. I mean, every dirty headbanger just wants to look pretty while listening to that song. And there's often a duality between good and evil in his songs, in Dio's whole body of work, I would say, and I really like that. I also dig the song I Speed at Night. It's like a classic new wave of British heavy metal sounding song, or should I say Sweet Savage riffing from Vivian Campbell. And Dio's vocal performance on this album is just otherworldly. The Last in Line is an all-killer, no-filler classic heavy metal record, and it's also my favorite Dio record. So, let's have a look at my full Dio rank now. And feel free to let me know if you guys agree with my rank or if you would have done any changes to it. I'm always curious to hear your feedback, because this one was rather tricky, since Dio has a handful of real solid albums. And if you're a Dio fan or just a fan of my channel, then hit that like button and subscribe with the bell notifications turned on. And if you want to support my work, then I'll suggest that you become a Patreon like these fine gents. Or go and grab yourself some merch at the Ruthless Metal store. It's all linked down below. And you can also find my Facebook page and my Discord and Spotify links down there as well. And that's all from me, so thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Bye bye.